Welcome to the Fort Collins Fellows podcast. From Colorado State University to New Belgium Brewery and the hundreds of miles of hiking and biking trails, Fort Collins has earned its well-deserved reputation as one of the top places to live in the United States. Your hosts, Patrick and Chris, were born and raised in Fort Collins. Patrick owns and runs Soukup Real Estate Services, a top-rated real estate brokerage company here in Fort Collins. Chris is the co-owner of the Murphy Whitlock Group, a top-rated residential mortgage broker based out of Fort Collins. Now join the fellas as they uncover the stories, places, and people that make Fort Collins so exceptional.
We are super excited today. We have an amazing guest. Patrick and I have been trying to get this gentleman on for a long time, and we're super excited. We have the Chief of Police of Fort Collins, Jeff Swoboda. Chief, am I saying your last name right first? I want to make sure I got Swoboda right.
Swoboda, perfect.
I love it. Well, hey, listen, we can't thank you enough for coming on. We've been dying to chat with you. And, you know, just so everybody knows, Chief, you've been with Fort Collins since 2018. You came from, it sounds like, is it Elgin, Illinois? Graduate of Western Illinois University, Illinois kid. I'm going to have to ask you about basketball a little bit later. But, Chief, thanks for coming on Fort Collins Fellas. And why don't we just start off with just telling everybody your backstory, where you come from, so we get a little bit of better idea of who our Chief of Police is here in Fort Collins.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris and Patrick, for allowing me to be on this morning. You got it right. Jeff Swoboda, been the police chief here in Fort Collins for almost 6 years. This June, it'll be 6 years, goes by quick. And I come by way of Elgin, Illinois. I was hired as a police officer there back in 1992. So been doing this work for over 30 years now. And I started there in 92 and started in kind of and maybe we'll talk about it more in a little bit, but as a resident officer. And so what this program is they put police officers in what we call stressed neighborhoods, where it could be overcrowding, it could be kids who don't have anything to do, there could be drug issues, you name it, a lot of things going on. And really, the officer that lives there is the neighbor, and also it's kind of meant to be a throwback to the old days where the beat cop knew everybody in the neighborhood and could solve problems before they became big issues. So I did that for almost 5 years, and then eventually got promoted out of the program. Was eventually named police chief there in 2010, and I was the police chief there from 2010 to 2018 until I came here. And really was just looking around the country, wanted to continue, doing policing. I love being a police officer. Was very happy where I was, but just wanted to try another area of the country. And as I was looking around, I was notified about Fort Collins. And quite honestly, I didn't know a ton about Fort Collins. But man, when I came out here for a Boys and Girls Club event before I was hired, just to kind of learn about the community, it was just blown away that at 7 a.m, there were 1,000 people in a ballroom to help kids in the community. I'm like, well, this is my kind of place. So been here ever since.
And do you have any kids yourself, Chief? Are you?
Nope. Wife Laura and I.
Okay, just your wife Laura and you. Awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's great. Well, we got a bunch to talk about today, and I guess I wanted to start off with, I was looking on your site. There were some interesting stats, Chief, that I was curious to get your take on. I have 172,000 is the population of Fort Collins. Your total staff is 371. You have 234 sworn in personnel. I'm assuming these numbers are right. I'm kind of going off. I was kind of blown away by that. I was surprised that for how big Fort Collins is, we only have a couple hundred police officers. I don't know what the ratio should be.
Yeah. And it's hard to say. In going back a long time ago, policing used to try to have ratios like how many police officers do you need per 1,000 residents. And it was all over the board, because it really depends on what does the community want? What are the expectations of the police officers that they want to hire? And so, there are some that have, very large percentages. I'm not sure what Chicago is anymore, but for a while, Chicago was like 5 officers per 1,000. And, we're usually hover somewhere in the ones, 1.25, 1.55, something like that. So more officers doesn't always mean safer. More officers really kind of goes back to what do we want our officers working on? And one of the things that we've been working really hard in Fort Collins is to identify those things that need what I like to say is a badge, a gun, powers of arrest to show up where we need that. But those other places that just need somebody to show up and provide professional service, that doesn't always need to be a police officer. Police officers are, as cities, most in the one of the highest trained, most expensive employees that people have. And when we have police officers doing things that don't need a police officer, that doesn't align with us. And so what we've been working on is hiring criminalists or community service officers that do a lot of service out in our community, but they're not police officers. So we're trying to, in some ways, manage the amount of police officers we have and not just say, wow, there's more calls for service, let's hire more cops. We're looking at it and say, do those more calls for service need police officers, or do they just need somebody to write a police report? And that doesn't always have to be a police officer. So yeah, that number is surprising to many because, everything that maybe that we used to need police officers for, we're trying not to make that the case going forward.
That's interesting. What would you say? I'm sure you have stats behind it, but what would you say is the number one call that City of Fort Collins police officers receive for a need of help?
I'd say it's a variety, but it's some type of nuisance complaint. It could be someone walking down the street, yelling at traffic. It could be a verbal, a few people kind of arguing. It could be a variety of just kind of a nuisance type complaint, call for service that our officers are responding to probably most often. Now, traffic crashes are always up there, but we send community service officers to those. Police officers don't handle those in Fort Collins. We have community service officers do it. So I would just say kind of a dispute of some sort would probably be the one that we go to most, and that encompasses a lot of somebody pitched a tent in my backyard. I can't open my business. Somebody is sleeping there. I was driving down the street and somebody was yelling and they were in the middle of traffic. Kind of those types of calls are probably the most often.
It sounds like those sound like transient, maybe homeless issues. And I have another question I'll do later. But since you're talking about that, how is that in terms of a level of a problem for you guys right now? Because I live right by CSU campus on College and Prospect. I hear the cars screaming down College late at night. I get all that. But what is your thoughts on the homeless situation and transient? And is that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that an issue for the city in terms of crime, or is it like you're saying it's a nuisance? Like, hey, this person is at the front door of my business. I need you to move on your way. What are your thoughts on the homeless issue in Fort Collins and how that equates to crime and what you guys are seeing out there?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything there. I gave a presentation to council, maybe now it's been 6 months ago or so. I think it was September-ish. And was talking about crime amongst the city and then where crime specifically is located. And then the percentage of those crimes that are caused by people that are identified as not housed at the current time, but based on booking information or tickets or things like that. Every city is dealing with it at some level. I think here in Fort Collins, what's very nice is that we have a lot of services for people. And so when I say, there's an issue or we're dealing with something, the nice thing is as we show up, we usually have somebody we can turn to. For instance, Outreach Fort Collins. If you haven't had them on as a guest yet, they would be a great guest for you all. They partner with us regularly. They are outreach workers. They are not police department employees. They're their own non-for-profit, and their heart is in the service of people who are experiencing homelessness. So there are times we get a call for service, and having a police officer show up, many times right off the bat, it might be confrontational. The person might have had a bad issue with a police officer in the past. Here's this guy in a full uniform or this woman in a full uniform. It can set it up to be a little bit confrontational. Whereas sending calls to Outreach Fort Collins, and we have sent, I'm not sure of the most recent numbers, but I actually just got their year in review, hundreds of calls for service that they handle for us that we don't need to send police officers for. So back to your original question, yes, the transient people who are experiencing homelessness, do they commit crime? Yes. Is it something that is, it's a constant, like that's all we're dealing with? Absolutely not. And we have pockets, again, so we utilize our partners like the Murphy Center and things. And the one point I really want to get on, though, is we created what's called a homeless outreach and proactive engagement team just last year. And that's a team of officers that go out and just work with those who are unhoused. So they They establish relationships. They tell people what the rules are. If they're violating the rules, violating the law, I mean, they still get tickets. They get arrested if it meets that level. But really their focus is, how do we solve the problem without just writing tickets to someone who just clearly can't pay for the ticket anyway? So what are we doing?
Right.
So let's solve the problem. At the same time, the business owner that is frustrated because the person's out in front of theirs, they have, they need us to do something as well. So they're really good. This team has done a great job working with those who are unhoused and saying, hey, that's not going to be acceptable. Here's, how can we help you? What do you need? And really working with our partners so that they can solve the problem rather than make arrests if the arrest isn't warranted.
So interesting. All the different programs, Patrick. I had no idea. It's fascinating.
I was managing Old Town Square when Outreach was formed, and it was this really interesting concept. But the success they've had and kind of the empathy they can show and the relationships they form and kind of that buffer zone they are between the public and police it's an amazing program. And obviously they've found support and success because now I think they have a Midtown, if I'm correct, if I remember right, they have a Midtown kind of department. But yeah, tons of different programs that aren't just kind of, brute force, so to speak, police, and try to kind of be that buffer, which kind of, I'm curious, how have you guys found Fort Collins as a community supportive or neutral or not to the Fort Collins police?
Oh man, we have so much support. That's one of the things, being a police chief now for as long as I have, I'm used to people coming and saying, here's a problem. What are you going to do about it, chief? What are you going to do about homelessness? What are you going to do about drugs? What are you going to, and here we do have people who ask those same questions. I mean, it's a great question to ask. I mean, I'm in charge of the police department. So what are we doing about it? But what I love about Fort Collins is they always follow up with, what can I do? How can I help? Like, it's not just, people recognize it. The police are not going to solve these problems, these big problems of drugs and addiction and homelessness and hunger and education. Like, we deal with what happens when those issues aren't addressed. Then the police are many times brought in. Mm-hmm. And so what I love about Fort Collins is just at almost every level, from the residents to council to city management, people understand they've got skin in the game here. They need to be making decisions and thinking about solving these problems, and they do. And we look at it really collaboratively. So the support has been amazing. It's not to say we haven't had people show up at council or, come out in front of the police station, especially going back a couple of years where people wanted to, cut the police budget or, get rid of policing as a whole. But that was a small minority. But what I love is that my team and me, when we were hearing that, or people in front of our department, we went out and spoke to them. And we said, help us understand it, because we want to get better too. I don't want to just defend policing for the sake of defending policing. Tell me your issues with it. And if you've got a better idea, how do we help people when they need help? When somebody calls and says, help, who goes if we don't have police officers? But if you have better ideas of how we're spending our money, I'm all ears. And so we had some great discussions with people. That same discussions came up with police officers in schools around school resource officers. That was a hot topic about that time. And again, what I love about Fort Collins is there was just great dialogue. There wasn't a ton of just shouting and people pointing fingers. There were people that had great, their perspective was we shouldn't have uniformed police officers walking the halls of schools. And I respect that. Everybody doesn't see the world the way I do. And when I see a police officer, I feel safer. Others don't feel that way. So what we had conversations around, the work has really been about, okay, what is happening there when you see the officers? What are things we can do to alleviate that? Rather than just saying we're not going to have police officers, how do we engage more so that trust can be built so that people can feel when they need help, they can reach out to this? And so we came up with some great stuff with Poudre School District, a memorandum of understanding. Our officers keep great data to show what our officers are doing every day, because some that were saying, we're hiding in the shadows, jumping out to write kids tickets for running down the hallway. It's that's not what our officers are doing. It's, they're dealing with speeding cars in front of the school. They're dealing with people who are doing safe to tells or, crimes that have been committed in the school. And our officers are dealing with real things in there. So it's not proactive enforcement to get people in the criminal justice system. It really is to have, solve problems again. And so I think all of those conversations came together so that we could get better. And I think we did get better based on having people who are challenging us and saying, hey, we don't think police should be in schools. And rather than say, well, we do, and there's more of us than you, we win. We said, well, help us understand what are things we can do to alleviate some of your concerns. And we work through that, like data, like softening the uniform at times. They don't need to be in uniform every single day, but there are times where police officers need their equipment. So how do we work through that?
I think I was reading on your LinkedIn, the mental health response team that you guys have partnered up with UC Health. I think that's an amazing thing that you guys are doing. If you can tell us a little bit about that, our listeners, what that's all about, because it all seems to tie together about it's like, it's not about the gun in the holster and the uniform and that. It's like a much broader approach to a lot of these issues that aren't necessarily crime related. And I watched that video on LinkedIn and it was great. So tell us, our listeners, a little bit about that partnership you're doing with UC Health.
Yeah, UC Health is such a great partner in here. And our mental health response team, we shorten it sometimes called MHEART. And what MHEART does is they partner a police officer from Fort Collins Police Services, because that's what we do. We know how to hire and train police officers. And we partner with UC Health because they're the professionals that can hire people in that space, in mental health space. And so we hire the police officer, they hire the mental health professional, we team them up together, and they go out and they hit the street. And we've got 7 days a week coverage now, which is great. There's still only 4 teams working. But what's fantastic is when they're working and a call comes in and they do a great job. But what's I think even more successful in this program is I might be out on a midnight shift on a call for service, and the call might be a domestic. The call might be, a husband and wife fighting, 2 neighbors fighting, what have you, and there's no mental health professional working. What we now are able to do is refer that call for service. So I go, I handle it, hopefully tell them, hey, go in there, sleep it off, don't come out and talk to each other the rest of the night. I can refer that call to the mental health response team. They go out there, the next day or 2 days later, they make contact, and they do it in a time when people aren't elevated. They're not frustrated. They're not, if people have been drinking or whatever else, that's not happening. So they go over there, they can have a conversation with people, look to see, hey, are there some unmet needs that someone has? Does this person need a referral someplace? They're able to go and do these follow-ups and really solve problems for the long run. In the past, in policing, as long as they didn't fight the rest of the night, I kind of did my job. What happens next week, next month, I can't prevent that necessarily as a police officer on the patrol.
When did you start that program? When was that program started, Chief?
We started that in probably 2020-ish.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's only a couple years old. It was a pilot program for a year or two, and then it got put in this budget, which is ending now. So it just got put in the budget for 23 and 24. So I think we started it in 21.
So interesting. That's I know it's a great video. I encourage people to go check it out just to learn a little bit about it and just that different approach. But well, Chief, I want to dive into a little bit about, Fort Collins is an amazing place to live. That's why we do this podcast. That's why people move here all the time. Patrick's in real estate. I'm in the mortgage side. We talk to people all the time, and they are coming here from Texas to California, from Virginia, from all over. And population is growing, whether you like it or not. And Patrick and I was born at Poudre Valley Hospital. I'm from here, and people are moving here. There's no denying it. What are you guys doing for preparing for the future, for that population going from 175 to 200 to 225? What are some of the things that you are doing as police chief now to get your department in the position to, maintain what you guys are doing such a great job now in the future?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking on, and we hit on it a little bit earlier, just because we're going to have more people, there are some things, we'll need some more police officers, right? Obviously, but not always at the same level. And so how can we be more creative? And some of the things that we're doing, the one that I'm really excited about, is we're calling it 25 by 25. And what that means is 25% of all police reports will be written by community members by 2025. So 25% of police reports are done by community members by 2025. And what I to help people understand this a little bit is that if you need to buy a plane ticket tomorrow, the odds are you're not calling a travel agent. You're going onto the website, you're booking your seat, you're picking your seat, you're picking the flight, you're doing all that stuff yourself. That's what we're looking at for policing. Now, obviously not for major calls for service where someone's been hurt, but you come home and you notice that someone hit your mailbox, knocked it over, the old-fashioned mailbox that's at the end of the driveway, knocked it over. In the old days, and even to this day in some respects, you call the police. I got damaged property. I need a police report so I can send it off to my homeowner's insurance and get that reimbursed. Well, what we're doing now is we're saying, you can call us and it's going to be a low priority call. So it might take, a long time for us to come. We're going to be getting to a point too, where we set up appointments for things like that. Say, you know what, because we're backed up right now. It's busy Friday night. We'll call you in the morning and set up a time where we'll come out and take that police report. Again, only for those things that aren't urgent. There's nobody hurt. There's nothing happened. But what we're pushing people to is now with smartphones and, computers, as long as people have one of those too, but we know that not everybody has that. But we ask them, are you willing to go online and write your own police report? And really all it is you go out there, you take a few pictures, you upload it yourself, you go online, you say, hey, when I left work today at 9:00 in the morning and my mailbox was standing and I came home at 5:00 and it's laying on the ground. I talked to my neighbors, nobody saw anything. My mail, we're not really going to be investigating that unless somebody came forward with a video, a Ring doorbell or something and said, hey, we caught the car that did it. Then, we could do something, but we're not going to, scour the neighborhood to find out who knocked down your mailbox. That's part of the issue of numbers of police officers. There's just,
Gotcha.
we make choices of what we investigate. And so one of the things that we're spending a lot of time is how do we kind of crowdsource the 175,000 people who live here, who are, and many, not all, many are very self-sufficient and can do, they just need a police report number to turn it into their insurance. That's all they need.
Yeah.
And they don't want to sit looking out their front wondering when the cops are going to show up. I called and it's been 45 minutes. When are they coming? We have different expectations. We say, oh, that's a low priority call. We're not going to come for a long, it might take a couple hours. We don't always tell people that. So how do we do a better job of customer service? So that's one of the things that we're working on is how do we use technology to make residents become more self-sufficient and not need a police officer for everything. We're starting to use our for speed. And, one of the big issues that we're dealing with is amount of people that have died on our roadways. Last year, our number is 15 because we investigated 15 fatal crashes last year. Our 15 people died on our roadways last year. A couple of those were private property, kind of nuanced, but the number the city usually goes with is 13. But, even so, how do we reduce those numbers? And so what we're spending time on is, using data, big data to figure out where the crashes are occurring, when they're occurring. Are they occurring because of left turns in front of an unprotected, you see probably more yellow or turn only arrows throughout the city. We're trying to identify where are those areas where we can make it safer. So rather than hire more cops because we're going to have more crashes, we're trying to reduce the demand and say, let's reduce the crashes, then we don't need as many cops. And so everything from radar enforcement, we have speed vans that we put all over.
Oh, I know. I've seen those. My wife's been caught by one of those.
Yeah. Did we send you a letter at some point? Yeah.
Actually,
so speed vans we're using.
Not to interrupt, Chief, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is a hilarious story. My wife is a big runner and she's running through town a couple years ago. And there was one of those whited out Jeeps, that like that. And that, nail you for speeding. She calls the police and goes, there's some creep in my neighborhood. And she had no idea it was like a speed car. And they're like, no, ma'am, actually they're out there, catching speeders and stuff like that. But my wife was like, this guy's creeping me out.
Yeah, we're the creepy person.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but I had to tell you that story.
No, that's great. And that's what we ask people to do. So that's kind of like to your first point, how are we preparing? I'm a big believer that the best defense against crime is a well-informed citizen. Meaning, if there's burglaries going on in your neighborhood, people are going in garage doors and stealing things at nighttime, you're going to make sure your garage door is shut every night. And so it's our job to tell you that that's going on. And so we spent a lot of time and energy on how do we keep our community notified as to what's occurring, because then if they can prevent it from happening, we both win. They're not a victim and we don't need to go out and write a police report. So as we're moving forward, it's kind of technology. It's also utilizing, crowdsourcing the residents to where they can write their own police reports. And then a big part of it is educating the residents as to what's occurring so that they know. Like I even know some residents who are like, we've had conversations about, do we advertise what are the most dangerous intersections in town? And we have said, yes, we're identifying where we have the most of our crashes. And I know people who say, you know what, my son or daughter starts driving, I tell them don't go to that intersection. They go the long way around, only right turns on their way into school. We're not having them make these left. And so that's exactly, I think, how we want to move forward is if we know where issues are happening and we tell residents, they can figure out their lives so that we can reduce the numbers and not just say, well, more people means more of these crashes. We need more cops, I guess.
What is the most dangerous intersection in Fort Collins?
It's the College Avenue corridor and also Trilby and Shields you wouldn't be surprised. Shields and Trilby down there. And then College, multiple ones at College. We put some of the red light cameras at them.
Okay.
So, and then there's other ones that pop up. There are, down by 392 or Carpenter Road and LeMay, there are some of those intersections there that are just kind of a little wonky.
Yeah.
So anywhere around College Avenue, speed is the big thing. It's the number one indicator for us for dangerous crashes. And so that's why we're spending a lot of time trying to reduce speed, because if we reduce speed, we reduce death, in our opinion.
Gotcha.
I would have thought LeMay and Jefferson. That's just such a funky little intersection right there, turning left from LeMay onto Jefferson. It's such a long left and a blind with that train track right there. But all right, well, I've got so many things I want to talk to you about, but we've only got a limited amount of time. So, but high level, fentanyl, meth, number one problem that's on your list, DUIs. And then like you were just talking about burglaries in the neighborhood. And we just dealt with kind of that funkiness that like comes across once every decade. Not funny thing because it was serious, but like the arsonist in Dry Creek. I know that was the sheriff's department, but I know the city of Fort Collins was helping out and being a resource. What are you guys seeing as kind of the number one, what is Chief Swoboda's number one problem that he wants to solve today in the police department? When you go in front of your team, what are you saying? All right, we're working on this. We're still working on this. We're still working on this. What is your number one problem that you're looking at solving right now?
Traffic safety. If I'm talking to my officers about what we can do, so it's the speed, it's the distracted driving, it's those things. If I'm talking to the community members about what are the things they can do, it's absolutely 100% fentanyl. That's the way things are going. It is an underlying issue in so much of what we're dealing with. It's, the days of experimentation are over. I tell parents all the time to hammer home with their kids. You can't get an aspirin from anybody else anymore. You need to go buy aspirin. You need to. I'm saying I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I'm just saying getting a pill from somebody nowadays, it could be a death sentence. And so you're better off just going to the store, buying your own things. Like how many times you walk around like, hey, who's got I got a backache? Anybody, got any Tylenol? You got ibuprofen? And I'm pushing that. I mean, it's not as if we're having a big issue with those being laced with fentanyl by any means. But what I'm just saying is any pills that you don't know that you see coming out of the thing that you bought, I'm telling people stay away from them. It's fentanyl is taking over, and it's sad to say, but it is in so much of what we're dealing with. Addiction, mental health, those two things are going hand in hand and are just of most things we're dealing with.
Where's it coming from?
So
how's it getting into our city? Yeah.
Starts in China with the precursors and then coming up from the border with Mexico.
Yeah. Patrick, go ahead. I know you got a couple more questions too. I know we got
and I was watching your presentation to City Council, and it was wonderful. And I know kind of those fentanyl numbers are jumping. When I was growing up, it was meth, and now it it's kind of flipped with. I think if I remember, you were saying it was like $1 a pill, or if you bought it in enough bulk, it was $1 a pill or something like that, and then somebody could take up to 80 cents, and somebody could take up to 13 a day. And it's like, if they go in, they're in jail and then they come back out 6 months later, but their tolerance has decreased. And then they have, instead of, they jump back up to the 13th and an overdose, so it was really, really interesting listening to that. And it's terrifying because I've got 3 kids, first ones in kindergarten. And yeah, it's absolutely, we've talked about that. So what would you say are, okay, don't take any pills out of any bottles for anybody else, but how would a parent educate their child for these situations? How can they help avoid? Because obviously that's just life demolishing, in my opinion, if a child were to consume something, but what are the risk factors and how can you avoid those for young kids in your household going to school, Poudre School District, all that kind of stuff that they're not in your care for 8 hours a day?
Yeah, it was when this epidemic started, it really it was a lot of over prescribing drugs, opioids to people who legitimate injuries, you name it. You probably remember there were plenty of stories out there, doctors that would just write scripts and get people out. And then things like oxycodone, all those things going on, the black market for that, people get a prescription and go and sell them. That was expensive. Fentanyl has taken that out of the game. There's been some legislation. Doctors have gone to jail. Big lawsuits that have come out where, states and cities have sued and actually gotten money back from big pharma that has, pushed these drugs for numbers of years. I know Colorado, the attorney general was a, big push to go after the doctors that were overprescribing. So people fell into that in many ways, kind of accidentally. They got a back injury and then oh my gosh, they were addicted. There's been plenty of those stories. You used to have to go out and actually look and find somebody who could get you a prescription. And it was expensive. It was, $20, $30, $50 a pill. Well, very strong, potent pills. Well, now what's happened is with this, just the uptick in the amount of fentanyl that's around, the pills have gone down so cheap. So yeah, we were able to buy them for 80 cents. So you could go and come up. So you go down to the Denver area, buy them for 80 cents a piece. You buy, anybody could become a dealer now. Back in the old days, you had to have a lot of money to become a dealer because to get enough volume to be able to start selling to other people, you had to have connections. So now if you can go and buy, a couple hundred pills for, $100 or a couple $100 at most, and then be able to turn around and sell those from, you bought them for 80 cents or $1 and sell them for $5, $3, $5, you're tripling, you're quadrupling your money. And so that's how it's really just exploded. And so now that the back injuries, eventually become addicted because of that, now that that's gone, it is experimentation. It's people who are trying to get high. And so I don't know, the best way to tell kids that other than what I've been saying. And again, because I talk mostly with adults and I wouldn't be so, bold when I'm talking with children, but the very first time, the last time, did I just say that wrong? I'm sorry. Did I call you?
No, I was just imagining you just hammering hard on kids. And
right.
I feel like I'm back in elementary school, the DARE classes that we used to have.
So you just tell, again, and so we're talking about, we're going to be having an event here at Fort Collins Police Services where we're going to have, kids in one room and parents come and we'll talk in another room. We've done this with internet safety classes. What do parents need to know? What do the kids need to know? And have school resource officers. And albeit if people want to come, we'll open the doors. And if people want to come, they will. But, so I don't have a good answer what we tell the kids other than it's here. I mean, it is absolutely in our community. It's in every community. They have access to it. It's about decisions and really just talking through consequences when kids are old enough to really understand how addictive this stuff is. And talk to people who are addicted. So and obviously, I've been a police officer for more than 30 years. So I haven't experimented with these drugs, but talking with people who have, that first time, man, you're done. You are addicted, and it just grows and grows and grows. So it's really trying to get people to not just do that very first, don't do the first cigarette and you won't be addicted to cigarettes.
Yeah.
Easier said than.
Chief, real quick, a couple of things before we let you go, and you've been amazing, and we got to have you back on because, like Patrick said, straight up, I grew up here. I remember hearing about the Cherry Street Gang when I was in elementary school and high school. Is there a gang problem? What are there gangs in Fort Collins, or I feel like I see a lot more graffiti lately, and it looks like it's coming from gangs. I don't know, what is the situation with that? Is there a problem, or is it just, a small pocket of individuals?
Yeah. And so we don't have going back to when people think a gang problem, street gangs taking over certain neighborhoods or even certain intersections, or then wars. Hey, that gang owns that part of Fort Collins and now this gang is in. So we have a shootout type of stuff.
Yeah.
We aren't dealing with that at all. we are dealing with because we're growing. We have people who come and they are in a gang and they live here in town. And so when you live that lifestyle and you run into someone else, just kind of incidentally see somebody else, or a fight happens at a bar on Friday night, then you see somebody on Sunday, or that type of thing. So yeah, we had a homicide that we're investigating. That is a gang motivated homicide recently. So we absolutely have people who are involved in gangs who are not only living here, but they drive through here. We have a major university, so it's not unheard of that people won't come, and where they were at, they were in a gang, and then they come here, and that lifestyle may or may not follow them. So it's not something where we are like, okay, that's a big, like, we need a gang unit to just really go out there and address it. But it's absolutely, our officers are well versed in identifying who are gang members. And at the end of the day, you know what we deal with is the crime. It's kind of like when we talk about with homelessness. We deal with the issue, whether or not, and this isn't meant to sound as cold as it's going to, we don't care if the person has a house or not. Like, if you're doing something to hurt somebody else, the fact that you're homeless it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. At this moment, it stops you from hurting someone else. And then, yeah, sure, we want to eventually you to get the resources that you need. It's the same with the gang memberships. The problem with the gang memberships that eventually people run into each other. So I might be a gang member who lives in Fort Collins and never see anybody, and I'm kind of out of the gang because I don't hang out with my guys anymore, and I moved here from another city. But then all it takes is showing up in Old Town and running into somebody, and this tattoo that I got on my face or on my hand, others will recognize immediately, and then something jumps off from there. So definitely something we watch. We have crime that we can say is attributed to people involved in gangs, but not to the point where we have, areas of town where we're thinking we have to put more officers.
Yeah. And then my last little thing too for you, Chief, is just the immigration stuff that's going on. Man, you hear Denver is a big city for that. It's just more of a macro issue. Is there an issue with Fort Collins? Are you seeing a lot of immigrants coming up to Fort Collins? And, I don't know where my question is going. I apologize for that, but I'm just curious your thoughts on the immigration issue that is very, front page of a lot of, papers and cities across America. And is that in Fort Collins? Yeah. Is that a problem in Fort Collins, or what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we haven't seen, like, in the ones that I've seen as well, when you see them on TV or what have you, you need to open up, you got to take over the daycare center because all of a sudden we have, 100 people here and they have no place to go. So we're not seeing that. We talk with our homeless outreach team. We're not seeing people on our streets that are specific. It doesn't mean we don't have some people who were in Denver, 3 months ago and came through the border and that type of stuff. But we're not seeing any wholesale. There were times where we were expecting, I think people, because it made the newspaper at times, like, Denver was going to, bus up some people up to Fort Collins, and then people, because there are non-for-profits in town who were saying, we can help them. So it's not to say like we're immune from it by any means. We have people who are coming here regularly from all over. Some obviously, come through the border, but we're not seeing like you see on TV where we're having people, in the streets specifically because they came up from the border and now they got off a bus and they're standing there saying, where the heck do I go? We got 50 people. Doesn't mean we don't run into individuals like that, but we're just not running into mass individuals or bus full of people, men, women, and children, standing on a street corner saying, I don't know where to go. Like, I just got off a bus.
And I don't see it either. I was just curious if you're seeing anything that we're not seeing on the, come almost behind the scenes, but
we're not seeing that. We hear from time to time that people are, one of the things that we do get here in Fort Collins is because we have a lot of resources and we're talking with cities when this happens, but we've had cities, tell people to go to Fort Collins because of all the services we have. And so we've dealt with that issue, again, separate from, immigration, just, homelessness. If you're in a city and you don't have a shelter, hey, Fort Collins has a great rescue mission, go there, or Catholic Charities or what have you. And so we see more of that than we do anything necessarily immigration wise.
I've got two questions. We finish every episode with, on a Friday afternoon, after you've had a long day of work, where you're going to go have a beer. But so think about that before I ask my first question. And this is a problem that I think I'm going to have to deal with on a daily basis. I'm going to be driving to and from work up 287, and unfortunately, there is a Krispy Kreme that's being built on Harmony and College. And are you as excited about Krispy Kreme being built as I am?
I am. I love Krispy Kreme.
It's an absolutely phenomenal establishment, and I'll be frequenting it.
You passed
often.
the test there, Chief. Good job. You got 100% on your quiz.
but we do.
Well, what I'm interested in is I've never been able to go into a Krispy Kreme and eat one hot just from.
They're amazing.
I can't wait.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
They're
thrilled.
amazing. The way I've eaten them. Yes, I'm excited.
Yeah, coming soon to a town near you. But we end each episode with like I was just saying, Fort Collins, it is the beer capital of the
microbrews, baby.
Microbrew capital of the world, really. And so fortunate to have so many great establishments and companies and people who rely on your services to keep them and their doors open and people being able to come in and out. So where do you find yourself enjoying a beer on a warm afternoon? Because we are getting into kind of that spring, summer time period.
So probably my wife and I, one of our favorite places to go is the Town Pump.
Ooh.
We like to sit small, just right out front.
Love the Town Pump.
It's nice. A lot of times we'll have our dog being groomed next door at is it Wags?
Yep.
And we'll have a beer there. But you just can't beat, Odell's Beer Garden. That's what. And then the one we go to regularly is Max Line. Kind of over
Max Line.
Area of town where we're at, and so we love going over to Max Line.
We've heard that a couple times lately, Patrick. Max Line.
Those are three solid answers, and I think that might be the first Town Pump answer.
Yes, Chief, you're the first one to mention Town Pump, which is the oldest bar in Fort Collins. Is that right?
Yeah.
Love Town Pump.
Yes, I'll tell you a real quick story too. When we have people come into the city, many times we'll go around the room and say, "What is the one place they need to go eat?" My also go-to is kind of old-fashioned, just like the Town Pump, is the charcoal broiler.
Ooh, great. My wife ordered spaghetti. I'm like,
that place is awesome.
My wife ordered spaghetti at Charcoal Broiler the first time she went there, and she doesn't like it. I'm like, yeah, because you ordered spaghetti. You ordered the pepper steak. Peppered steak, baby.
Yes.
Well, Chief, man, this has been awesome. Like Patrick said, I got a bunch more questions, but we got to get you out of here. And listen, we really appreciate your time. And I think on behalf of, I would say 99% of all people in this town, we thank you so much for everything you're doing and making our city safe and really one of the best places to live in the United States.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I'd love to come back anytime. And I would just close with you and your listeners. I mean, we're all in this together. It's, we have got a big goal to be the safest city in the country. We know that's a big goal because we're a big city. But I like to say, why play a game if you don't want to win? And that's, I think, I'd love for us to become the safest city. And it'll take all of us to get there.
I love it. Well, thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, thanks, guys.
Friends of the podcast, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. We thank you so much for your support. And just so you know, my amazing co-host, Patrick Soukup over there, he is the founder, started Soukup Real Estate. If you ever need any questions about buying or selling or just want a market report on your existing home, reach out to Patrick. His team is absolutely fantastic. Born and raised in Fort Collins. His information is right there on the page. Strongly recommend reaching out.
And same for you, Chris. As if you guys are looking at buying or refinancing a home here in Northern Colorado, there's nobody better to reach out to than the Murphy Whitlock Group. And Chris Murphy is going to take incredible care of you. So do not hesitate to reach out, ask questions. He is in no rush, no hurry. So give him a chance. And I think he's going to do a great job for you. Thank you for watching.